intent of a personnel assurance program, and that is basically to reduce the chance of human error and to assure a safe operation in our manufacturing process. It's a commonly shared goal. We all have a stake in it. We all have a very personal thing involved in this personnel assurance program. Dr. Kelly had mentioned one of your responsibilities being that of observing and possibly reporting deviant behavior. Now, in asking you to do this sort of thing, we're not conducting a witch hunt. We're not trying to develop a group of stool pigeons or whistleblowers. We merely want you to help us monitor the human elements and the safety and security of our operation here. You know, there's no one person who can monitor the behavior of all 557 of you in the Red Bar program, in addition to the 618 people in the White Bar program. It's humanly impossible for one person to do this. So we have to rely on others. We have to have help in getting feedback regarding observed inappropriate behavior that could lead to an accident or an incident. Now, what we suggest to all of you, and especially to the supervisors, is to get to know these people that you work with extremely well. Get to know what's important to them, know what their value system is, know the areas of sensitivity, their areas of vulnerability, their so-called soft spots, and above all, take time to learn how to listen to people. Now, listening, of course, requires us to quit thinking about ourselves so much, and it's really hard work, so I'll not spend too much time on it. But it's important that we do get this personal knowledge of what kind of individuals we're working with. Most of us are fairly predictable in our behavior. We have established patterns of behaving, and we have personality traits that other people expect to see displayed. Now, it's when we start to change that others become alarmed. These changed behavior patterns serve as a clue to others that we're experiencing trouble of some kind. And let's very briefly look at a very few of the danger signals that you might keep your eyes open for. For example, a marked change in personality. The individual might have been cheerful and easygoing in the past, and you grew to expect this type of behavior. Now you find that he's becoming irritable, tense, edgy, difficult to get along with. This is an indication that there's change taking place. Or take the person who's been very neat, clean, and orderly, and you notice that now he's becoming untidy and irresponsible. It's possibly an indicator of trouble. Or the person that's normally been very sociable and outgoing, gregarious, and he starts becoming withdrawn. He no longer maintains these normal social contacts, stays to himself a lot. This is change that could be significant. Peculiar behavior or mannerisms heretofore not exhibited, that is, the person is acting outside of his sphere of normal behavior patterns. Or the appearance of undue argumentativeness. He takes offense at just about anything that you might say. Or a marked decrease in efficiency without apparent reason. For no reason this guy is going sour on us. He seems to be losing ambition. His work isn't up to par. Hypersensitivity to criticism is another thing. Especially when it didn't exist. Another individual may display the lack of ability to stick to any task or interest for a long time. His interest seems to wane and wander, and this can be indicative that the person is experiencing trouble. Or the person who seems to be doing too much daydreaming and fantasizing. Or an individual might make comments or display actions showing a deep and embittered mistrust of others. Or he might make comments and display actions showing that he believes everybody's against him, that nobody loves him, nobody cares for him, he can't trust anybody. Or you might even, in rare occasions, display or observe talk or behavior that doesn't really make sense. You might think, well, heck, this guy's making these things up in his own head, and they don't seem to have any bearing on the real things going on around him. Other things that we might cite as being indicators of a troubled individual: abuse or misuse of authority, absenteeism, especially when it's excessive, alcoholism, becoming accident prone, having more than his number of accidents. We could go on and on and on mentioning these things, but they do indicate that change is taking place within the individual and possibly something is troubling him. Now, each one of us, we got to remember, is going to act irrationally, abnormally, or maybe unrealistically at some time or another in our lives. We all go through what I like to call life crises, and they do definitely affect our behavior. There are hundreds of things we could mention under life crises, such as the death of a loved one, possibly a husband or a wife, a child, close relative, close friend, serious or prolonged illness, either of ourselves or a loved one, maybe a close family member, has a very dramatic effect on our behavior. Divorce can be an extremely traumatic time for individuals. Possibly the arrest of the individual or a member of his family. This can be traumatic. It can be a very critical situation. Financial setbacks, possibly personal bankruptcies, the loss of a car, the loss of a home, whatever it might be. Problems with the children. Boy, we see a lot of this today. Can be a trauma to the entire family, and it can be a very critical situation. Unhappy love affairs enter into this picture too. They can put a person into a crisis situation. The loss of a job, periods of heavy drinking, we can go on and on. As I say, some people can usually handle these things by themselves. They'll muddle their way through to a solution. We find other people that maybe don't have the inner resources that the stronger individual has. They may need help to get through these. But usually we find the life crises are going to be resolved within about 8 to 10 weeks. Some of them linger on, especially a reactive depression following the death of a loved one, quite often can linger much longer than that. But we find most of these smaller life crises resolving themselves, with or without help, within about, at the most, I'd say 10 weeks or so. So what happens there? The person usually adjusts to the problem. He gets his problem behind him, and so he goes on with the business of living. He puts this crisis behind him, puts it out of his mind, and he forgets it. But the trouble that we find here is the rest of us, those of us who are working with him or who are his friends, we tend to have a long memory. And we tend to remember this problem too long. We tend to brand him. We tend to create a stigma about this individual. And so maybe a few years from now when we're talking about this individual, they say, oh yeah, he's the guy that went into a real nosedive when his wife left him and just about didn't bounce back. We tend to remember some unpleasant or negative things for too long a period. There's a reason for this, of course, by playing down an individual, pointing out only their faults and their problems. It tends to enhance our own self-esteem. It makes us feel good to know that there's somebody a little worse off than we are. So the self-image seems to enter in here. Now, I'd like to spend a few minutes on talking about the self-image. Now, I think it's important for introspective reasons. The self-image can get us into a lot of trouble. It's a very vital thing to us, but it's built over a number of years. It's nothing that we create overnight, or we say, this is the way I'm going to be. We're a victim of circumstances. We have our self-image formed because of the way people have responded to us throughout our entire life. Now, if we had parents that didn't love us, or if we grew up without parents, we may display a very low self-regard or a negative self-image. We don't think too much of ourselves. We feel that there's no one who could possibly be interested in us. We think in negative terms only. And we do certain things, of course, and avoid doing certain other things because of the reactions of people to our actions. It's so important to all of us. And generally, we're going to behave in a way that gives us satisfaction. And we, conversely, tend to avoid decreasing this satisfaction. That is, we'll avoid behavior that makes us feel uncomfortable. So we get to the point where we've established an equilibrium in our behavior. Now, we behave within certain well-established limits. We have parameters here. And it's this behavior that we've developed, and these limits which we've imposed upon ourselves, and which we think of as, and in quotes, ourselves. This is me. And this is what people refer to in speaking of your personality. That is the behavior, limitations, and the predictability. This is your personality. Well, we behave this way because we think it's consistent with the picture that we have of ourselves and the picture that we want others to have of us. So by the time we're adults, at the age that most of our group is at this point, we have a self-picture that's relatively stable and it's relatively consistent.
We pretty well know what we're going to do, and we pretty well know what we won't do.
We know what our limitations are. And as we grow older,
You're going to find that we become less and less resilient,
we become less adventuresome, less flexible, and we're not as likely to behave
inconsistently with this self-image that we've developed.
We tend to say when we see some outlandish behavior over here of a younger person, boy, I just can't image. We all behave differently. We have these differing parameters of behavior that I mentioned a while ago, and we feel comfortable within our own little sphere of behavior patterns here. Now, my caution is that just because another person behaves in a manner that we wouldn't allow ourselves to do, let's not make the mistake of branding him as being deviant. Merely because he acts different than I am, that makes him weird, that makes him abnormal. Let's not get trapped into this sort of thing. Because there are so many things that enter into the developing of this self-image. As I said, no two people have the same experiences, and we quite often will use ourselves as a frame of reference here.
Now, there are exceptions, of course. I think when you spot psychotic behavior,
the person who's a schizophrenic, obviously in the fantasy world, hallucinating and delusional and so forth, or the person who is displaying perverted behavior, immoral or amoral behavior, the sociopathic behavior, destructive criminal. Of course, we have a right to pass judgment on this sort of thing.
We all like to think of ourselves as normal, don't we?
And those who differ from us as being abnormal.
Frankly, I've never been able to come up with a good definition of normality,
but we all, again, use ourselves as a frame of reference here.
So, don't get trapped into being critical or demeaning any of these individuals that you work with
who tend to differ from you.
You know, being well regarded, being
well thought of by others is one of our most basic needs.
We tend to live in a way that assures